Good morning. If you don't know who I am, I'm Becky and I go along to the Orpington congregation. We're in Hebrews for our devotional and we are in Hebrews 9 verses 23 to 25 today, and I have entitled the devotional Original versus Copies. So whether you follow these devotionals every day, you're very familiar with where we've got up to, or you might be dipping in and out, I just thought it might be useful just to start with a really brief overview of Hebrews. And commentaries inform us that the author of Hebrews is unknown, but was more than likely to be a Jewish believer. The letter would have been written after Paul's final letter between 67 AD and 70 AD. It was written for Jewish Christians, and from indications in some of the chapters, these Jewish Christians were facing fierce persecution, which was causing some of them to drift away from the actual Christian meetings and back into their Jewish synagogues. I love Hebrews for many reasons, and first and foremost because it all points to Jesus. The basic truth can be seen and understood at the surface, so that a new believer with only limited knowledge of biblical truth can understand, but there are deeper levels, deeper layers of meanings that can be delved into. The Jewish Christians reading this letter for the first time would have understood some of these deeper meanings, as they were very familiar with their Jewish heritage, with its customs, laws and practices. They would have known that the tabernacle spoken about in these chapters that we're looking at was originally a tent, the instructions for its design being given very specifically to Moses by God back in the time when the Israelites had escaped from Egypt and spent 40 years in the wilderness before entering the Promised Land. They would have known that the tent had a first section called the Holy Place, and separated by a thick curtain was a second section, and that was called the Most Holy Place, or the Holy of Holies, which contained the Ark of the Covenant. They would have known that the high priest was only allowed to enter the Most Holy Place once a year on the Day of Atonement to offer a sacrifice for his own sin and the sins of the people, and this had to be by the shedding of blood from an unblemished calf or a goat, and without the shedding of blood there was no forgiveness of sin. In the verses that we read today, Hebrews 9 verses 23 to 25, the author explains to the Jewish readers and to us today reading it that all these practices were symbolic and necessary in order for the true heavenly things to be revealed. In other words, the old order of things, the old covenant, was all a copy of the real thing, the new covenant. What we know today, these Jewish Christians hadn't yet fully understood. God designed all these Old Testament practices from what was originally in heaven. The Holy of Holies is the very throne room of heaven itself. Jesus is our high priest, our great high priest. His own body was broken on the cross, and the physical curtain in the Temple of Jerusalem was torn from top to bottom at the moment he died, a symbol of the veil being torn in the most holy place, so that we can now have access into the presence of God himself through Jesus. His blood was shed on the cross instead of the blood of a calf or a goat. Because of his death, his sacrifice for our sin, we are made clean and have relationship with God through Jesus for eternity. What amazing, wonderful truth. We should never get familiar with these truths, but always be thankful for our salvation and our freedom that Jesus has won for us with his own death and resurrection. Today, I encourage you to come to Jesus afresh with the help of the Holy Spirit. Ask him for forgiveness and know that because of that once and for all sacrifice, you are made fully clean and cleansed from a guilty conscience. As his child, you have access to the very throne room of heaven itself. Kneel there before your Father, who loves you. And as it says in Ephesians 3 verse 20, he is able to do far more abundantly than all that we could ask or think, according to the power that is at work within us. God bless you today.